Black widow. Few animals carry a name this famous. You hear it, and you already picture something lethal, a deadly venom, an animal worth keeping your distance from. For more than a century, that was the story. Books, documentaries, newspapers, and films turned her into the spider with the venom. In the end, the name became more famous than the animal. And maybe that was the problem. Because while everyone was watching the venom, we stopped watching the spider. We stopped noticing legs that work in a way that should not be possible. A web that, up close, is a piece of natural engineering. An animal so dangerous to her own kind that even the male has to announce himself before approaching, or risk being mistaken for prey. None of that made the black widow famous. The venom did. And yet the deeper you go into this animal, the clearer it becomes. The venom was never the story. It was only the headline. The real story is far stranger. Get closer. Start with the simplest thing, the thing anyone can see. A black widow walking across the wood of a porch. The body is a black sphere, polished, about the size of a small pea. Underneath that abdomen, if the animal turns, the marking appears. 2 red triangles meeting at a point, an hourglass. But watch how she moves. The 8 legs advance with a strange, slightly broken rhythm. They fold inward normally, and they push outward with something that never quite looks muscular. It is not. A black widow has no extensor muscles in her legs, not reduced, not weakened. They simply do not exist. Every joint has muscles that pull the leg inward and nothing at all to push it back out. What she has instead is pressure. Fluid fills her body, and she can squeeze it. To extend a leg, she contracts the front section of her body and drives that fluid down into the limb. The pressure rises, the joint opens, the leg straightens. It is the same principle as the arm of an excavator, a hydraulic piston. No fibers pulling, fluid pushing. And this is where the detail turns unsettling. Internal pressure is already high in a resting spider. When she jumps or runs, it can double or triple in a fraction of a second. The system runs at full power for as long as the animal is alive and pumping. The moment she stops, it is over. That is why a dead spider is always found in the same posture, curled, all 8 legs drawn in against the body, closed in on itself. It is not a final spasm. It is not agony. It is the opposite. It is what remains when the force holding them open disappears. The flexor muscles are still there, with nothing working against them, and they pull inward one last time. A dead human body keeps its shape. A spider folds because her shape depended on a pressure that no longer exists. The system has one enormous advantage. It lets her build legs that are extremely long and extremely thin without carrying the weight of the muscle it would take to move them. She can afford disproportionate limbs because she never pays to fill them. But it has a cost, and the cost explains almost everything else. Hydraulics are powerful, and hydraulics are slow. Rebuilding pressure takes time. An animal that moves this way cannot sustain a chase, cannot correct mid-run, cannot wear a target down. Every movement spends fluid, and the fluid is slow to return. Add the weight of that abdomen, a sphere loaded with silk, eggs, and reserves hanging off a tiny frame. Now watch what a black widow does with her day. Nothing. She hangs upside down at the center of her web, motionless, for hours at a time. A single spider can live in the same corner for years and cover only a few meters in her entire adult life. This is where the animal stops making sense. We have a predator that does not chase, does not pounce, moves poorly and rarely, and spends most of her existence going nowhere. And she still eats. Beetles, crickets, cockroaches, centipedes, prey faster than she is, prey far larger than she is, prey that could crush her without difficulty if the encounter were ever a fight. It never is. Something is catching those animals for her. If you were expecting one of those circular, symmetrical webs, the ones photographed at dawn with dew across them, let it go. A black widow web looks nothing like that. It is a tangle. Threads running in every direction, no symmetry, no visible center, no recognizable pattern. It fills the gap between two boards, the corner of a woodpile, the inside of an overturned pot. It looks careless. Honestly, it looks badly made. For decades, it was described in exactly those terms: irregular webs. Chaotic webs. The word we settled on was cobweb, the same one we use for dust hanging from the ceiling of an abandoned house. It is one of the best engineered structures in the animal world. That apparent mess has two completely distinct zones. The upper section is a dense tangle of crossing threads. That is the retreat. That is where she stays, hanging upside down, in the position she holds for most of her life. The lower section is something else entirely. A set of near vertical lines running down from that tangle to the ground, anchored to the surface at their lower end. Those lines are the trap, and they work on pure mechanics. Each one is set under tension, like a rope pulled taut. The final stretch, the part touching the ground, is coated in droplets of an adhesive the spider produces herself. And the anchor point is deliberately weak. It is built to give. An insect walking underneath meets no visible barrier. It meets a thread. It sticks. And in trying to pull free, it breaks the anchor, which is exactly what the system is waiting for. The line snaps upward with all its stored tension and lifts the animal clean off the ground. That is the entire mechanism, and what it achieves matters more than how it works. An insect suspended in the air has lost everything that made it dangerous. Its legs have nothing to push against. Its jaws have nothing to bite into. Its strength and its weight, which were advantages on the ground, are now worth nothing because there is no surface left to use them on. That is how a black widow under 2 centimeters long feeds on armored beetles, centipedes, and cockroaches. She does not beat them. She disables them before she ever touches them. And it is worth going back to the previous block here. We had a predator that was slow, heavy, incapable of chasing anything. None of that has changed. It has simply stopped mattering. The speed comes from the trap. The force comes from the tension stored in the threads. The work of capturing is done by the structure, not by the animal. She builds once and collects for weeks. And the build is not improvised. The density of the trap lines, their tension, the position of the retreat, the height of the whole structure. All of it shifts depending on the location, on what prey is available, on how long she has gone without eating. The same species builds different webs under different conditions. But one piece is missing, the strangest of the three. That web is built in a dark corner, and a black widow can barely see. She has 8 eyes and terrible vision, incapable of forming a useful image. She could not recognize her prey if it were standing in front of her. She does not see it, she feels it. Every thread in the structure runs back to her legs, and in those legs are organs that detect the smallest deformations. The web is not just a trap, it is a sensory organ spread across the entire corner. Reading vibration alone, she knows the size of what has fallen, where it is, and what condition it is in. She has built something that hunts for her and reports back. And only when that information tells her it is worth it does she come down. What she injects then is unlike the venom of any other animal her size. Here comes the part everyone knows, and almost everyone knows it wrong. Start with what is true, because it is stranger than the legend. Black widow venom does not work like a snake's, or a scorpion's, or like the venom of most spiders on Earth. Most venoms destroy. They break tissue, dissolve cell walls, clot blood, digest muscle from the inside. They are chemical demolition. If you have seen photographs of bites that leave craters in skin, that is what a venom of that kind does. Black widow venom destroys nothing. Its main component is a molecule called alpha-latrotoxin. It is a large protein, and it does not attack tissue. It attacks communication. Everything an animal body does depends on messages. A muscle does not contract because it decides to. It contracts because a nerve ending releases a measured amount of a neurotransmitter at the right moment, at the right point. That release is controlled, ordered, reversible. Alpha-latrotoxin embeds itself in the membrane of the nerve ending and opens a channel that should not be there. And the control disappears. The nerve ending begins dumping its neurotransmitters with no order and no break, all of them, at once. It is not that the nerve stops working. It works at full power, unable to stop until its reserves are completely gone. In prey, the result is immediate. Every muscle receives the order to contract at the same time. The animal locks. And because the messages never stop, it cannot release either. It stays rigid, contracted, unable to move, while its own nerve endings empty themselves. There is no wound, no structural damage. The system is still intact. It has simply lost control of itself. And there is one more detail that pushes this close to impossible. That molecule is specific to vertebrates. A different variant acts on insects, another on crustaceans. A black widow does not manufacture a venom. She manufactures a catalog with components aimed at different nervous architectures. Now the potency. Measured by weight, alpha-latrotoxin sits among the most active substances in the animal kingdom. The comparisons that get made with rattlesnakes are real. Gram for gram, this venom is several times more potent. And now the number that reorders everything before it. A black widow weighs roughly 1/4 gram. Her venom glands are proportional to that body. The total amount she can store is minuscule, and the amount she injects in a single bite is a fraction of that minuscule amount. A rattlesnake delivers a dose that can be tens of thousands of times larger. Potency per milligram is a fact about the molecule. It is not a fact about danger. For that, you multiply potency by dose, and a black widow's dose is very close to nothing. Which is why the real numbers look nothing like the legend. Thousands of bites are recorded in the United States every year. The overwhelming majority never produce serious symptoms. There is a well-described clinical picture with intense pain, muscle, rigidity, and sweating that can require hospitalization. And even so, deaths are extraordinarily rare. Decades have passed without a confirmed fatality attributed to this spider. She does not bite out of aggression either. She defends no territory. She attacks nothing she cannot eat. Nearly every recorded bite happens through direct pressure on the animal. A hand inside a glove, a body against a board, a foot inside a boot. And there is a biological reason underneath all of it, which is the most revealing part. That venom is expensive. Every molecule costs energy and protein, and rebuilding the reserve takes time. An animal that barely moves and eats whatever the web delivers cannot afford to waste it. The venom is not a defensive weapon. It is a feeding tool, measured out precisely onto prey that is already immobilized. And that word, measured, changes the whole scene. She does not bite blind. The vibrations have already told her the size of what has fallen. The amount she injects is matched to that information. The extreme potency does not exist to kill more. It exists so that a tiny dose is still enough. A 1/4 gram predator cannot afford to miss or to overspend. And now think about what that means for anything else approaching that web. The structure detects everything that touches it. The venom is administered according to what it detects. Everything arriving on those threads enters the same procedure. Everything, including males of her own species. A male black widow is a fraction of the female size. He is smaller than much of what she catches. And to reproduce, he has to do exactly what a trapped insect does. Climb onto that web and move across it. He has to walk into the trap, voluntarily. And somehow convince her that he is not food. Start with the problem. because it looks unsolvable. A female black widow can be 100 times heavier than the male. He is a few millimeters long, pale and elongated, with no hourglass, often carrying side markings that look nothing like hers. The two sexes are so different that for a long time they were described as separate species. That male has to reach the female, and the female sits at the center of a structure that reacts to everything touching it. There is no alternative, no side route, no hour of the day when the web is switched off. Any approach means climbing onto those threads and moving across them, generating exactly the kind of signal that brings her down and opens her fangs. A male that moves the way prey moves will be treated as prey. Here is what happens instead. Reaching the edge of the web, he stops. He does not advance. And he begins striking the threads with his legs and his abdomen, producing a sustained, regular vibration that can go on for hours. It is not nerves. It is a transmission. When those vibrations are recorded with instruments and compared against a struggling insect, the difference is obvious and systematic. An insect produces abrupt signals, high amplitude, irregular, broken by unpredictable silences. That is what an animal fighting to get loose sounds like. The male produces the opposite. Low amplitude, steady rhythm, constant, prolonged repetition. He is broadcasting a pattern no prey could ever produce, because nothing thrashing for its life can hold that kind of regularity for minutes, let alone hours. The signal does not say "I am here." It says "I am not food." And there is a second part, more specific still. He does not only vibrate, he works the web. He cuts threads with his fangs, wraps them in his own silk and folds them down, steadily reducing the size of the structure. The behavior is well documented across several species in the genus. By cutting and packaging, he reduces the surface area capable of transmitting signals, and with it, the amount of information reaching any rival male nearby. He is manipulating the channel he is speaking through, shrinking the reach of the web while he talks across it. There are species in this genus where the male, after a long courtship, positions himself directly in front of the female's fangs. It is active behavior, not an accident, not carelessness. In those cases, copulation lasts longer and more sperm is transferred. It is worth being clear about what the legend exaggerates. The animal's name comes from the idea that the female systematically devours the male after mating. In field observation, in the American black widow, that is not the norm. It happens, but it is the minority. Plenty of males mate and leave. Sexual cannibalism does exist in the genus, and in some related species it is common. But the portrait of a female who always kills, as a matter of habit, belongs more to the storytelling than to the data. And that is exactly why the male's behavior is so revealing. The entire repertoire, the sustained signal, the pattern impossible to mistake, the cutting of the web, the hours of waiting before he advances. All of it exists because the risk is real, even when it is not certain. Natural selection does not need the bite to happen every time. It only needs it to happen often enough that males who could not announce themselves left fewer offspring. What we are looking at is an identification protocol developed under lethal pressure. And now it is worth looking back. That web started as a trap. Then it turned out to be a sensory organ. Now it turns out to be a communication channel as well, carrying two completely different messages across the same structure and having both read correctly. The same surface that tells her the size of a captured insect also tells her that the animal approaching is not one. None of this would work on its own. Go back to the beginning. A body the size of a pea. 8 legs with no muscles to straighten them. An animal that is slow, nearly blind, incapable of chasing anything. On paper, a poor predator, and one of the most successful small predators on the planet. The question was never how she survives despite her limitations. She never had to solve them. She is slow, and it does not matter, because the speed comes from a thread under tension. She is weak, and it does not matter, because the force comes from gravity acting on a suspended animal. She is nearly blind, and it does not matter, because the information arrives through her legs. Every shortfall has a compensation, and not one of them sits inside the animal. They sit in the web. The venom does the same thing. A quarter-gram spider cannot manufacture much of anything. The solution was not to produce more, but to produce something so active that a minimal dose would do. That extreme potency, the one that started the entire legend, is not a display of power. It is a consequence of being tiny. And none of it works separately. The web without the venom is not enough. The venom without the web is useless. The exact dose is only possible because the vibrations reported first. And the male's language exists only because those two things together turn any misunderstanding into something final. They are not even the same kind of solution. One is mechanical, one is a material, one is chemical, one is behavior, and they all fit. For more than a century, we talked about the venom. The books, the documentaries, the films. All of them told the same story, and that story was about a molecule. It was true, and it was, by a distance, the least interesting part. The venom did not make the Black Widow extraordinary. It was only the first thing we measured. The fame landed on the wrong tool. The closer you look, the stranger the world becomes.